Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch this brief video providing an overview of the Land Use chapter for the 2026 update to the Massachusetts Rural Policy Plan. In this video, we will review the context regarding land use challenges, recent progress made, and review the draft recommendations in the plan. Your watching this video now will allow us to have meaningful discussion during our public engagement meetings for the Land Use chapter. When we convene for our live statewide feedback meetings, the primary questions we will have for attendees are: does the summary of this chapter's challenges, successes, and achievements feel right and representative of your community? Which of the recommendations would make the biggest difference in your community? And what's missing? The goal of the Land Use chapter is to influence policy to steward rural land in Massachusetts so communities can grow sustainably, protect working lands and natural resources, host clean energy wisely, and be fairly compensated for their stewardship role. In Barnstable, Berkshire, Bristol, Franklin, Hampshire, and Plymouth counties, roughly 30% of land is already permanently protected. When land enrolled in Chapter 61 programs is added, acreage temporarily reserved for farming, forestry, or open space at reduced tax rates, protected land in many communities exceeds half of the land area. Once steep slopes, wetlands, and other undevelopable or sensitive areas are considered, the amount of land realistically available for new development is quite limited. That is not inherently a problem, but it fundamentally changes how the Commonwealth should think about where and how growth, economic development, conservation, and clean energy can be accommodated. One of the top recommendations of the 2019 Rural Policy Plan was to create a statewide land use plan that could balance anticipated growth pressures around Greater Boston with slower growth and land-rich conditions in rural regions. The Massachusetts Integrated Land Use Strategy, now in development, is designed to do exactly that. MILUS aims to prepare the Commonwealth for long-term sustainability by prioritizing land use for 4 intertwined goals: producing an additional 220,000 housing units, permanently protecting 40% of total land area for carbon sequestration and food security, siting enough clean energy facilities to reach net zero emissions by 2050, and maintaining Massachusetts' economic strength by identifying land suitable for growth of important Massachusetts economic sectors. Since 2019, the state has also created the Office of Outdoor Recreation, launched a Farmland Action Plan to support agricultural viability, expanded One Stop for Growth to include a Rural Development Fund, revised the criteria for the Housing Choice Program, created a Disaster Relief Fund to help farmers and businesses recover from climate-related disasters, streamlined permitting for single-family houses and ecological restoration initiatives, given the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture the legal right to own land, and have recognized the benefit of thinking on a watershed scale and the rural stewardship responsibility of assets such as the Quabbin Reservoir. Even with these advances, rural communities face significant land challenges. Very small towns depend on volunteer boards and thinly staffed town halls to develop and administer zoning, subdivision rules, and other policies that are supposed to concentrate growth in centers, protect working lands and sensitive resources, identify appropriate sites for clean energy and storage, and respond to private proposals for large-scale battery or solar installations. This is particularly difficult in southeastern Massachusetts, where, due to the proximity of Boston and Providence, communities are experiencing some of the highest development pressures in the state. Farmers and foresters are already forced to adapt to changing climate conditions, including shifting hardiness zones and change in viable crop varieties, the introduction of new pests and diseases, and shifting temperature and precipitation patterns that alter forest and farm ecosystems and species mixes. More frequent droughts and intense localized storms test the resilience of rural watersheds, roads, culverts, and farm fields. Rural lands provide ecosystem services that benefit the entire state: drinking water storage and recharge, carbon storage, habitat, flood mitigation, stormwater runoff absorption and filtration, and food and forest products. But those contributions are rarely fully recognized or compensated in state finance and policy. Rural lands can be at the forefront for the Commonwealth to meet its housing, conservation, clean energy, and economic development goals. Rural land should not be treated primarily as the backyard for statewide goals, hosting disproportionate shares of conservation land, clean energy projects, and water supply protection, without adequately accounting for municipal fiscal impacts, working land's viability, or local priorities. For instance, state policy has inadvertently created incentives that have led to rural lands being used for ground-mount solar projects, despite the loss of forests and farmland. As MILUS and related initiatives move forward, an opportunity exists for rural communities to be full partners and beneficiaries in those decisions that can fully account for municipal fiscal impacts, working land viability, community sustainability, and local priorities. The following recommendations are high level. Many of the recommendations in each chapter of the plan include sub-recommendations that speak to specific strategies and tactics regarding how the high-level recommendation could be implemented. We strongly encourage you to review the PDF of the full recommendations for this chapter at the same URL through which you accessed this video. The URL is also cited at the top of these slides. Recommendation 1. Ensure rural priorities are embedded in MILUS. 2. Modernize the state-owned land reimbursement framework. 3. Support and expand the Office of Outdoor Recreation. 4. Develop clean energy and battery siting that respects rural context. 5. Help rural communities with land use planning and climate resiliency. 6. Expand technical assistance and support for working lands and climate impacts. And 7. Support the economic potential of agriculture and woodlot management by investing in critical middle-of-the-supply chain infrastructure. When we convene our meetings, the primary questions we will have for attendees are again: does the summary of this chapter's challenges, successes, and achievements feel right and representative of your community? Which of the recommendations would make the biggest difference in your community? And what's missing? Thanks for taking the time to review this chapter, and we look forward to speaking with you live soon. In the interim, if you have questions or concerns, please direct them to Mark Maloney, Communications Manager with the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. Thanks again. Take care.